Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching, and this is part 6 of my How to Paint HeroQuest series. This video we're working on the skeletons, mummies and zombies from the set, so 4 skeletons, 2 mummies, 2 zombies in a really quick speed painting style. Now mostly this is Games Workshop contrast paint. We do use some standard paints and I've prepared the models exactly as I've shown in my How to Prepare the Models in HeroQuest video, so check out the playlist for that video if you want to know why I've prepared them and undercoated them like I have. Starting off with a gunmetal colour, I personally prefer standard metallics rather than that non-metallic effect. Yeah, I think it personally gives a nicer effect for the rusty metal we're going to go for at the end. 2 things to watch though. You've got to be careful that when you're putting the metal on, you don't leave any white showing through, because that makes a really weird effect with some of the washes later. And also, don't get any of the metal on the areas you don't want to be metal coloured, because we're using contrast paints and it has a really weird effect on top of metal if it's not in an area you want it. So just be careful as you're going through, and that applies to all the paints really. Now we're working on the skin colours. We're taking the Golden Flesh, and particularly with the mummy, we're just dropping that into all the gaps where the wrappings that are around him are kind of peeling away and showing the skin. So dropping that in there. When you're using this colour, you've got to get a balance with contrast paints. If you don't put enough on, it doesn't run into the gaps and cracks and give the shading effect of contrast. If you put too much on, it floods it. So just get used to it, and you'll see kind of how much I'm putting on as we go. But we're putting the skin colour across all the exposed flesh areas of the models. Then we're moving on to the Skeleton Horde for the bone, which obviously on the skeleton is replacing all the flesh areas. And when you go through again, you can see there I do sometimes take the brush over the same area 1 or 2 times if I think there's too much or not enough paint on there, so you will just get used to that as you go. So taking that bone colour over all the skeletons and then moving back to the zombie. The flesh colour is now dried, it's been a few minutes, and we're taking the Skeleton Horde colour and putting that across all the wrappings around the mummy. You will see how quick this goes on. I said before, the mummy paint scheme was ridiculously quick, and it really was. So I'm showing 30 seconds of footage here where I do kind of a quarter of the model, and it really was a couple of minutes through this stage, 30 seconds for the stage before. This is a really quick scheme, and I think really effective. And that's one of the tips when you are batch painting and going for speed. Use models that you can use the same colours across. You want enough models so that the paint will be dried before you go back to the next one, but not so many that it's disheartening you're working on loads. So quite a nice small batch working on here. Now you've seen there we're working on the Snakebite leather colour, so the skeleton's armour, the straps and the wrappings of the weapon. Interesting point, you will see I've missed on his chest there 2 pieces of armour that I actually thought were his collarbones to start with, but I did go back and correct that later. So just interesting, when you're going through, if you do see a mistake, you can always fix those mistakes. Now putting the snakebite leather onto the wrapping around the arm of the zombie and also his kind of belt area there. You'll notice when I'm doing it, I'm moving the angle of the model all the time to make sure I'm not leaving any white showing, and we're just getting the paint in all the right areas there. Now the wrappings on the legs of the skeleton, you could absolutely do these with snakebite leather, but I wanted to give some colour variance across the model, otherwise it would have ended up just brown across quite a lot of the model. So we're using a Gore-Grunta fur to represent there, but you could equally do the wrappings around his bottom leg in leather and then just a tuft sticking out in the fur, but I thought it'd be quicker and, you know, nice effective colour scheme to do the whole thing in that fur colour. The Wyldwood, another brown. See what I mean? It's like brown and brown. So we're doing some different brown tones as we go through, but it does work quite nicely on the model in the end. And just taking that Wyldwood colour on all the wood areas, being really careful because this is a darker brown colour we've used so far. So if you put this onto something you've already painted, it will almost overwash that colour. So just be careful when you're doing it. I talked before about the volume of paint you have to put down. On the shield here you can see I'm putting quite a thick layer of this colour because the mouldings that make the wood grain effect are quite deep. If you didn't put much paint on there, I don't think it would have had much of an impact and it wouldn't really give that full effect. So we're not putting so much on that it's running down onto the metal, but we're just putting a nice coat on so it can really sink in and get that contrast effect, which is what this scheme's quite good for. Now, if you've watched the other videos in the series, you'll know that I've used red across a lot of the clothing of the bad guys so far, and I want to carry that theme on. So this is putting a pop of colour into the skeleton, but also tying it into the rest of the army. So putting it on the skeleton's kind of kilt, I suppose you'd call it there, or wrappings, whatever you call it, around the skeleton's waist there, and onto one of the zombies' trousers. Now, I like to think of the zombies as adventurers that have fallen and been turned, so it's quite appropriate for them to have quite vibrant clothing on, because the adventurers probably would be more colourful than the bad guys when we get to it. So working on the red across one of the trousers. And what we're also going to do is use that red, whilst it's still open, to do a little bit of detailing. Now, you don't have to do this stage, but just a little dot of red with a smaller, thinner brush into both the eyes and onto the tongue, puts just a tiny bit of extra detail into the face, that although this is a speed paint scheme, this hasn't added any extra time, but it will add extra effect. Now, I didn't want to do 2 zombies with bright red trousers, so I just thought for a laugh, why not pick the yellow and drop yellow onto the second zombie's trousers, just to make them look a little bit different. You could absolutely just do both of them in red or both of them in yellow if you fancy, but I thought, why not while I'm here? Doesn't really add any extra time on. Now, weirdly, the zombie is only wearing 1 shoe, very zombie effect, so we're taking some black and just dropping a little bit of black around the shoe for the black leather. And I do move on and use the black for the zombie's hair, because I don't think black hair on both of them is a problem. You could do brown hair, you could put the yellow in the hair if you wanted to do them blonde, but just a couple of bits of black on there to represent the zombie's hair. And now we're going in for some extra detail. Now, this is not speed painting, this is back to a standard Vallejo bone white paint, and I'm just dropping some of that bone white onto the teeth of the zombies and onto the mummies, because we did the bone white for the wrappings, and you can see how nicely that's dried, and it was also on the teeth. But I thought a little bit of extra detail, just be nice on the face. It didn't really add too much time. Now, to try and make the skin of the zombie zombified, we're taking a Plaguebearer Flesh colour, and we're probably dropping this onto somewhere between maybe 1/3 to half of the flesh, just to give it that kind of slightly rotten flesh effect. Now we're nearly done. We're working on the bases. Now, this is the same Basilicanum Grey that we used on a lot of the stone scenery that we've seen in the series before. Putting this onto the base that we've prepared with sand. Talk about that on the how to prepare the models video if you want to check that out. And then when this is all thoroughly dried, do not do this stage 5 minutes after you've done the other paint. You probably need to leave this overnight to dry. So this, although it's quick, you do need to probably leave a day between them to, before you do this stage. This is just now a Games Workshop Seraphim Sepia shade wash that you put over every single part of the model. So all the model, including the base, and this will bring all the tones down, unify a little bit, dirty the models up. You can see there, I'm going over some areas a couple of times, just to make sure I'm not putting too much of this wash on. You don't want it in big pools, you don't want it so it's dripping off. Leave that to thoroughly dry, and you'll see the unified paint scheme it's giving here. So we're giving a nice rusty effect across the weapons. You can see there, it's brought all the different tones down a little bit. Those areas where you may have left a bit of white showing, perhaps in between the different colours where, the flesh might meet the clothing or whatever, it fills in those gaps, gives a nice dirty, sepia effect, obviously, oldie worldy kind of dungeon vibe that I think these models really suit. The zombies again, I'm really pleased with these. These were at most 6 minutes a model, so a really quick scheme, but I do think the models look really good. I'm really looking forward to getting this on the gaming table. Still some more videos to go of finishing the rest of the set, but I hope you did like that one. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that other YouTube jazz, and hopefully I will see you again on the channel for another video.